Hello, this is Don Hall with Burley Bees. We're here today with Big R, and we're going to talk a little bit about equipment. Now, this is an intro to beekeeping segment about equipment, so bear with me. We've got a lot of things here that we're going to talk about. We're going to try to do it here in the next 15 or so minutes. We've got a hive set up right here. This is a open screen bottom board with a sticky board underneath with 2 brood boxes and a medium honey super with a queen excluder, with a telescopic cover with an inner cover. And so we're going to get into this. Now, once again, we're just going to skim across the surface of this so that you can kind of understand a starting point on gathering up the equipment that you will need. Okay, so when you put these bees, when you do the install, and we'll talk about an installation on the next segment, is you're going to start with one of these deep boxes. Now, this is a kit that Big R offers, and it comes with a veil, a bee brush, hive tool, gloves, smoker fuel, feeder, smoker. Now we're going to get into this in a little more detail in just a second, but I want to go through this hive and show everybody what's inside of there for people that aren't familiar with what we're talking about. This is called a telescopic hive cover. The reason it's called a telescopic hive cover is because it telescopes over the edge. Okay, so we're going to set this out to the side. This is an inner cover. Now you can see that this inner cover has a hole, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but it also has an exit. Now this cover has got 2 sides to it. This side has got some depth to it. This side is flat. So when the bees are actively bringing in nectar and making comb, you want to always put the flat side down on your inner covers. And for people that don't remember that, it says this side up. Okay, so if you want to flip it over in the winter time and put some supplemental feed under it, then it acts as a shim also, as long as it stays nice and thin. Okay, the reason for an inner cover underneath a telescopic cover is because bees like to glue everything down with propolis. Okay, that propolis, especially after your 2nd or 3rd season, it sticks everything down like crazy. Okay, now these kits come with a hive tool. Now these hive tools, it kind of looks like a little nail bar, but they're made out of stainless so that you can clean them up. You know, the smoother the steel, the easier it is to keep clean, because you don't want bacteria or anything growing on it. But you use this hive tool, once this stuff gets stuck down, to wedge these apart. You put it in there and slow and steady, and we'll break that propolis loose. And then you want to put this down. Okay, we're going to set it back over here. Okay, this is a medium box. Now, any box can be a brood box or a honey super. The difference is a brood box has brood inside of it, and a honey super has honey inside of it. The reason most people use smaller boxes for a honey super is just because of the weight. One of these deep boxes full of honey weighs 90 pounds. So this small box full of honey, it weighs 40 or 45 pounds. You know, so once you've got this set up and you're working up chest high, there's a lot of difference between 45 pounds and 90 pounds. So this is a honey super. It's got 10 frames inside the box. Okay, so in this box, these are medium frames. These frames have plasticell. So this is a plastic foundation that's covered with a thin layer of beeswax to promote the bees to draw comb off of this. Okay, so this is called a frame. We'll get into that a little bit later when we're talking about inspections and things. But these removable frames have been around since before 1850s. In 1851, Lorenzo Langstroth is the one that got credit for the removable frame and utilizing bee space. Now, bee space is 3/8 of an inch. Now, anything over 3/8 of an inch and a bee will fill up. So these frames are designed to work. These ears, if you can see the ears, are 1/8 of an inch apart, spaced in the boxes. So once these frames are correct, then there's 3/8 of an inch, and it promotes the bees to draw comb in the ways that are more conducive to good beekeeping management. So with these removable frames, you can take these frames out, you can move them around, you can extract the honey. If you've got a small apiary, you can take 3 or 4 frames out and take the honey off of them, put new frames in. So just to have the interchangeability of the frames, it changed beekeeping forever. And that was, once again, in 1851. And it really hasn't changed since then. When you're talking about, this is a Langstroth hive right here. And so when Langstroth hives are all the same dimensions, so a Langstroth hive from one company is the same size as a Langstroth hive from another company. Now this is a medium honey super, just like we talked. Okay, now a lot of people will put a queen excluder underneath their honey super. I personally don't use these, and beekeepers are about 50-50 what they think about using a queen excluder or not. These brood boxes is where your queen will be, and she'll be rearing, you know, she'll be laying eggs, the larvae there, the pupa there, everything's down under here. And so once you add that honey super, you add the queen excluder, and these notches in the excluder are just small enough where the queen's abdomen won't fit through the gaps. So you put that in there, it's exactly what it sounds like, queen excluder, because it excludes the queen out of the honey super. Now the pros are you don't get brood up in your honey super. And the good thing about that is once you have a honey super that's got brood in it, there's a tiny little piece of the cocoon left after the pupa hatches. And so when you extract honey out of it, you'll hold it up to the sunlight and you can see tiny black specks in your honey. And that's fine, and I'm sure everything that goes through a bee colony actually improves your health. So I'm sure the tiny black specks in the honey are probably good for you. But if you're going to sell your honey to your neighbors, they're not going to want to see black specks floating around in it. So this queen excluder will keep that from happening. But the other 50% of beekeepers say that it also slows down the bees storing honey up above it because they don't want to travel through it because it impedes them. So anyway, for you people out there that are new to beekeeping, it is very true about what they say and beekeepers' opinions. If you ask 10 beekeepers their opinion, you're liable to get 15 answers. So that's a queen excluder. This is a deep brood box. Okay, so I've twisted where you can see it there. It's got the hand holes in all four sides. It also, these are 10 frame Langstroth boxes, so it also has the 10 frames here. Now these are deep frames. Okay, now this is the same plasticell. It's plastic foundation with a thin layer of beeswax over it, so the bees will draw comb off of it. Hopefully they'll put it where you want them to, so you don't end up with a huge hodgepodge mess inside of there. The reason they make black foundation for brood frames is so, especially new beekeepers, when you're inspecting these things, you can see the white eggs down inside of there. Now when you're inspecting, looking for these eggs, they're the diameter of a human hair and about 4 times that length. They look like a grain of rice standing up on its end. Once they hatch on the 3.5, 4 day mark, they lay down, and at that point they turn into a larva. But when you're when you go into this box to do an inspection, you're not necessarily looking for the queen, you're looking for signs of the queen. Now, signs of the queen are eggs. Because an egg lays down at 3.5 to 4 days, if you see eggs, you know within the last 4 days the queen's been inside of there. Okay, so this is the second deep brood box. This is the first deep brood box. It's exactly the same thing with the 10 frames. Okay, this is an entrance reducer. Okay, if you turn it this way, it's got this small entrance right here. If you turn it over, then they've got a larger entrance, or you can remove it completely. Now we'll talk about this when we're talking about our installation, because you want this to be as small as it can be so they're defensible from yellow jackets and other colonies of bees. If you leave too much space, they'll get robbed out. So you want to keep this as small as you can until you start to see bees really piling up at the door, but we'll talk about that in the next segment. Okay, this bottom board right here there's really 2 ways to go in a Langstroth box: a solid bottom board or a screened bottom board. A screened bottom board is good for ventilation, and it's also good for what we call an IPM, the integrated pest management. Okay, so this screen bottom board is, you've got your landing area there for when they come in. This is small enough the bees can't go through it. You take out this board right here, it's called a sticky board. We spray it with a cooking oil or something similar to that, just a vegetable oil, rub it down, and you slide it back in there. And then you can monitor the mites that actually fall off the bees, and then they just have it a grid so you can kind of keep a count to see what's going on. Now, this the mites themselves, is they'll drop off those bees, and if they don't stick into that sticky board, they can crawl right back up inside of there and get on that. But that is a good, it's not necessarily a management tool, but it's a good way to see what your mite loads are doing. And if you leave it in there all the time, it'll get covered up by wax cappings and things like that. So I like to just put it in there when I need it. So you want to put it in there when you treat for mites, and then monitor the mite count the fall. So put it in there a day or two before, and then treat your mites, and then see how many mites fall off of it, and then take it back out, and then put it back in there a couple of weeks later, you know, depending on what treatments that you use. But I like to check it with a sticky board before the treatment and after the treatment to see what the efficiency was of the actual treatment itself. Okay, so as far as the hive components, that is about it. Now, these kits, they come with an entrance reducer, hive tool, smoker fuel, and gloves. Now, I want to talk a little bit about personal protective equipment, because a veil or a jacket and gloves are an absolute must. Now, when you're keeping bees, I like to wear a full jacket, but if you have a long sleeve shirt on, you know, if it gets right against your skin, a bee can sting through it. But if it's a little bit loose, they really can't sting through it. Now, you always want to wear light colors, because bees go after dark colors like crazy. They've evolved to really be aggressive towards dark colors, I guess because of the pests like skunks and bears and things like that. But you really want to go with your protective gear. Your smoker, I think, is your next most important item. Okay, now these smokers, they come, it's just a regular bellows smoker. Now, what a lot of people make the mistake of doing is they get their smoker and they light it up. I like to use burlap as a smoker fuel because it makes a nice cool smoke. You don't get a lot of embers coming out. When you light this thing up, you want to check it to make sure that it's not hot, that you don't have embers coming out, and you don't want to burn your bees up. You don't want to asphyxiate your bees. You just want to smoke them a little bit, and it hides their pheromones, and it also triggers them to start engorging themselves with honey instead of thinking about what you're doing. But when you get a new smoker, you want to open it up, and there's a pan in the bottom of it that's flat. Now, this pan in a bellows smoker has legs, and you need to bend those legs up like that, and then put it back in your smoker. And what that does is that lets the bellows blow the air underneath the pan up through the smoker fuel. If you don't do that, your smoker's never going to work right. And a lot of people think their smoker doesn't work right because they haven't dealt with that little pan in the bottom. Okay, that burlap is it's my favorite. You can use limbs, pine straw, pine needles. That makes a really good smoke. If you get in a bind, you can light it with dead grass and then poke dry grass down in it. Once you get some embers, we'll poke the green grass in there so that it'll smoke a nice cool smoke. But typically I carry burlap, and Big R has full tow sacks for like $4 in the feed section that I buy and just rip up, roll it up into rolls, and I put like a paper masking tape around it to hold it in place, and then I just drop it in. And then I use just like an acetylene torch, a little one, to just light it up. I carry it in my bee box. I can light my smoker and be working with it, you know, in a minute or two. Okay, this is a division board frame feeder. When you're going to use a feeder like this, and every feeder has pros and cons. This is another type of feeder. This is a mason jar Boardman feeder. It's an entrance feeder. Okay, so the frame feeder, let me set this box back over here where we can see it. So a feeder typically goes in place of 2 frames because it's about 1.5 frames big. It holds 1 gallon of syrup. So you take 2 frames out and you put the frame feeder in. These come with ladders and things that go inside of them and caps, and that works okay. But you know, I typically just take a piece of hardware cloth or something and put in there as a ladder or a float. But you can take a piece of hardware cloth and just lean up in there where the bees can climb up in and out of it. Because the ladders, what happens is that once you get a lot of bees in here, they go down in the ladder and they push each other into the syrup like lemmings jumping off a cliff. You know, once they get down in there, they just can't get back out and they push themselves in. So I like to leave the whole top open and just put a ladder in here so that the whole thing is usable. Okay, the mason jar Boardman feeder is, now for people that don't know, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, we feed syrup. Okay, in the spring we feed a 1-to-1 sugar syrup. That's 1 part volume sugar to 1 part volume water, and it makes a 1-to-1 syrup that we feed the bees. In the fall we go to a 2-to-1 syrup, which is 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And the only reason we do this is to restrict the amount of moisture that we're putting into the box, because these bees generate their own heat. And when they generate that heat, if there's any excess moisture in there, it causes condensation. And that condensation will go all the way up to the top and then drip back down on your bees. Cold weather will not kill your bees, but moisture will. Okay, so in the fall we feed 2-to-1 syrup, in the spring we feed 1-to-1 syrup. So this mason jar Boardman feeder goes right in the entrance like that. Okay, the pros and cons to it is it's an open invitation to other colonies to come in and eat this syrup. And so when this jar goes empty, and when this colony is going hot and heavy in the summertime, you know, they can eat 4 of these jars in a day easy enough. And so as soon as that goes empty, now you've got robber bees at the entrance of your colony. And if it's a stronger colony, or if this is a weak colony, they will go in and start sucking the royal jelly right off the larva, and they will kill this colony off just in a few days. So, you know, it's easy to do for a new beekeeper to refill this, but, you know, pros and cons to every type of feeder. Bee brush, that when you're gonna brush bees off of a frame, is be sure and brush them up. Because if you brush them down, their legs are locked into place and you damage their legs. So you always want to brush them up. Now there are a lot of different things. As far as education, beekeeping is an evolving knowledge. You want to read everything you can get a hold of. You know, Pollen Sub, Honeybee Healthy provides the minerals and stuff that they need. We don't have nearly enough time. We could talk forever about the different things associated with beekeeping, but I hope that provides a little bit of information for you to know what you would need to get started equipment-wise. So thanks for watching, and if you're interested, the next segment will be about installation of a nuke. Thank you very much.